Welcome to 15 Minutes on the Commute. I'm your host, Amber, and for the next 15 minutes, I'll help you catch up on what's happening around the world, without the noise and without the scroll. Every weekday morning, we break down one important global issue, politics, tech, AI, economy, or even health and beauty, so you can start your day smarter, sharper, and maybe even a little ahead of your coworkers. Today's topic: the first 100 days of Donald Trump's second presidency. From sweeping tariffs to agency shutdowns and headline-making executive orders, America isn't just shifting direction. It's hitting the gas. But what does this all mean for us and for the world? Let's unpack it all in 15 minutes.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're jumping straight into a really fascinating period, the first 100 days of President Trump's second term.
Right. A lot happened.
Yeah, think of this as your shortcut to understanding what's been going on because, well, we've waded through a whole stack of news reports and articles.
From all over, right.
Yeah.
NPR, Fox, CNN.
Exactly. AP, New York Times, CBS, you name it. We've tried to pull out the crucial bits.
And the mission here is really just to give a clear, balanced picture.
That's it. The key actions, policies, the reactions they've sparked, without getting tangled in all the political spin.
Okay, so looking at these first 100 days, what really jumps out is just the sheer amount of ground they tried to cover and how fast. It really felt like they came in with, a very defined playbook and just started running it immediately.
Absolutely. Day one was kind of a whirlwind of executive orders.
Yeah.
And one that really got people talking was the creation of DOGE.
DOGE, right,
Yeah.
the Department of Government Efficiency. Let's unpack that a little. It's an informal body, apparently led by Elon Musk, focused on, well, like the name says, government efficiency, but with a very clear emphasis on cutting budgets.
And when we say cutting budgets, some of the language around it was pretty strong.
Yeah.
Well, it was described in some reports as a battering ram aimed right at the federal government.
Wow.
And there were even quotes, apparently, from the budget director about wanting federal workers to feel trauma from these cuts.
Trauma. That really signals a very aggressive approach to shrinking the government, doesn't it?
Definitely. Which, naturally led to a lot of uncertainty for federal workers.
You bet. We heard about reduction in force emails going out.
Right. RIF notices.
And these sort of vague requests for information about people's recent work sounds like a period of real upheaval for a lot of public servants.
And adding to that initial disruption was that OMB memo, M2513.
Ah, yes, the Office of Management and Budget, the White House's budget arm, essentially.
Exactly. And this memo, it ordered a temporary freeze on federal funding.
But that didn't stick, did it?
No, what's interesting is it immediately faced legal challenges, got blocked by a judge,
Okay.
and then ultimately the administration withdrew it. So a big move, but, well, short-lived.
Right, a short-lived freeze. Now, here's a bit of a twist, though. Despite all this talk about efficiency and slashing budgets, reports actually suggest the U.S. has spent more money so far this year compared to the same time last year.
That is interesting. It does make you wonder about the practical impact, of those initial efforts.
It really does. Raises some questions.
Yeah, and if you zoom out a bit, lots of analysts are pointing towards Project 2025.
Ah, right, the broader conservative initiative.
Exactly. Seeing it as kind of a guiding star for this administration's agenda. And it explicitly calls for dismantling what it calls the DEI apparatus.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion effort.
Right. And removing related terms from federal rules and regs. So while the immediate budget numbers might seem a bit counterintuitive to the message, the underlying goals seem to be driving this more systemic reshaping of, the federal government's priorities and structures.
Okay, let's switch gears then. Immigration. That's definitely been a central theme.
Huge focus.
Yeah. Sources across the board highlight a crackdown on immigration as, like, a key achievement the administration is pointing to.
Right.
We saw that executive order aiming to end birthright citizenship for kids born here to non-permanent legal residents.
And the declaration of an emergency at the southern border, too.
Yeah. And the deportation numbers are pretty striking.
They are. Reports suggest around, 139,000 people deported in just those first 100 days?
That's a significant number. And the case of Kilmer Abrego Garcia, that really illustrates some of the, well, the complexities and controversies here.
It really does. He was wrongly deported. The government even called it an administrative error.
An error, right.
Yet they've resisted helping him return, even after a Supreme Court order.
And their reasoning.
Well, they argue El Salvador doesn't want him back, and they're citing broader foreign policy considerations. It really makes you think about the human side of these big policies.
It's a very unusual situation.
Yeah.
Highlights that tension between the policy and individual lives.
Definitely.
Then we also saw that executive order targeting sanctuary jurisdictions.
Right. These are the cities or states, generally, with policies limiting cooperation with federal immigration enforcement.
And this order could mean they lose federal funding, face legal action.
That's the potential consequence, yeah.
Big leverage.
We also had that highly debated deportation of 3 U.S. citizen children.
Yeah, which the administration defended by calling it a parental decision.
That justification definitely sparked a lot of discussion. Ethical, legal.
For sure. And the policy of conducting immigration enforcement in sensitive places like courthouses, schools, churches, that's also drawn significant criticism.
And the renewed focus on extreme vetting is back.
Plus talk of maybe requiring social media screening for folks applying for immigration benefits.
Which brings up a whole host of questions around privacy, doesn't it? And what's fair screening?
Absolutely.
And going back to Abrego Garcia, the administration characterizing him as a gang member.
Despite a judge saying the evidence was flimsy and no criminal record.
Exactly. No record in the U.S. or El Salvador. It raises concerns about the information being used in these cases.
And then there was President Trump's statement about due process for people entering illegally.
Oh, right. They get whatever my lawyers say.
It's very direct, some would say concerning, regarding the legal process.
That's a very strong stance.
And to really drive the point home visually, the White House lawn was apparently covered with signs.
With photos, right, of individuals they identified as alleged illegal immigrant criminals.
Yeah, a very public way of emphasizing their priorities on this.
Okay, let's pivot. Tariffs and trade. Another huge pillar of the Trump agenda.
Absolutely central. His conviction seems to be that tariffs are crucial for, reclaiming American greatness, revitalizing industry.
And we've seen some major ones implemented, most notably that 145% tariff on goods from China.
Wow, 145%.
Yeah. And not surprisingly, it triggered retaliation from China. They slapped 125% tariffs on U.S. goods.
So instantly a tit-for-tat situation.
Exactly. You see how quickly that can escalate.
And then there's this reciprocal tariff policy. Now, this sounds a bit unique.
It is. The idea, as we understand it,
Yeah.
you take the U.S. trade deficit with a country,
Okay.
divided by the total U.S. imports from that country,
Right.
and then have the result. That's your tariff rate. It's a formula designed to, well, theoretically level the playing field.
But what's the potential impact on, the cost of things for regular Americans?
That's the big picture, isn't it? Polls are already suggesting a lot of folks, maybe 6 in 10, feel Trump's policies have pushed costs up.
And there's that wider economic anxiety, too.
Yeah, pretty widespread feeling, something like 69% in some surveys, that a recession is at least somewhat likely in the next year.
Makes you wonder how these trade policies might be feeding into those worries.
It's a factor to consider, for sure. We are seeing some specific adjustments, though.
Like with cars.
Right. There was an easing of auto tariffs through an executive order and a proclamation, so maybe a recognition of the potential hit to that industry.
But the overall picture is still pretty dynamic.
Very much so. And that situation with Amazon, that was interesting.
When they considered showing the tariff costs on product pages.
Yeah. The White House initially called it a hostile and political act.
Strong words again.
But then President Trump later said he had a great call with Jeff Bezos. So it highlights the sensitivity around how these tariffs are perceived and communicated.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just China, is it? The aim seems broader.
Oh, yeah. Clearly aiming to reshape global trade, negotiating with various countries. We saw that temporary pause on some tariffs for Canada and Mexico.
But that expires soon, July.
That's right. And both Canada and the EU have already hit back against U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs with their own measures.
And even within the U.S., concerns from Republicans.
Yeah, some House Republicans voicing concerns about how tariffs might fuel inflation, raise prices for consumers.
So definitely a lot of moving parts. The term topsy-turvy was even used for the stock market's reaction.
Understandable, given the uncertainty. Okay, shifting focus again, DEI and transgender rights.
Right. The first 100 days saw executive orders clearly aimed at rolling back diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives very directly.
Yeah, one order reportedly defined gender as just a binary male or female based on sex assigned at conception.
And cut federal funding for gender-affirming care.
Correct. And another order apparently told federal agencies to, well, fire all workers involved in DEI programs.
Wow. Just terminate them. It's a very swift, direct dismantling of those efforts in the federal government.
But we've also seen investigations launched into Harvard University and the Harvard Law Review.
For alleged race-based discrimination.
That's the allegation, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the University of Pennsylvania was found to be in violation of Title IX over its trans athlete policies.
And given a tight deadline to fix it.
Yeah, just 10 days to take action. And significantly, an executive order banning transgender women from competing in women's sports at the federal level.
Okay. Now, let's touch on this area of political retribution and the expansion of executive power. That's been a big discussion point.
Huge. The pardoning of everyone convicted for actions during the January 6th Capitol riot is obviously a major development there.
Absolutely. And coupled with that, reports of firings and investigations.
Targeting people who investigated or indicted President Trump, yes.
And stripping security clearances from political opponents. Figures like Biden, Harris, Cheney, Kinzinger.
Milley, Vindman, too. It sends a very clear message.
There's definitely a sense, reading some reports, that the fear of retaliation might be silencing dissent, even within the Republican Party.
It creates a chilling effect, potentially. And there are certainly accusations that the administration is actively pushing the limits of presidential power.
Maybe banking on a friendly Supreme Court down the line.
That's the speculation from some quarters, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We even saw things like House Republicans apparently blocking Democratic efforts to probe Defense Secretary Hegset's use of Signal.
Right. The messaging app
Yeah,
highlights the partisan dynamics.
for sure. And it's probably no surprise that lawsuits are already flying.
Challenging these actions as unconstitutional, ignoring the rule of law.
Exactly. Legal experts have talked about a flood the zone strategy, pushing lots of things quickly, asserting broad executive power. Echoes of Project 2025 again.
Okay, let's run through some other notable developments quickly. President Trump wanting a permanent ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine.
Right, stated publicly. Meanwhile, House Republicans setting a really ambitious goal past the president's agenda by Memorial Day.
Very fast timeline. And the Treasury Secretary insisting Republicans are in lockstep on tax cuts.
Suggesting unity there. We also saw FEMA restructure the Emergency Management Agency.
Trusted allies put in charge.
That's the reporting.
Yeah.
And the dismissal of Biden appointees from the Holocaust Museum Board.
Stating a preference for steadfast supporters of the State of Israel.
Correct. The U.S. also reportedly warned it might walk away from mediating the Ukraine war if there isn't progress.
Taking a firm stance there. Domestically, a big lawsuit against AmeriCorps.
Yeah, 24 states plus D.C. suing over workforce and program cuts.
And concerning for the scientific community, the dismissal of scientists working on the National Climate Assessment.
That drew attention, definitely, and some other maybe less expected news.
The Canada comment.
Yeah, President Trump apparently remarking about maybe considering making Canada the 51st state.
Generated quite a reaction, I imagine.
You could say that. The FCC also raised concerns about potential illegal ads on NPR and PBS.
And there was that issue with international students' visas.
Right, some SEVIS accounts and visas were apparently terminated, but then later reinstated. So some confusion there initially.
On a more local level, Trump visited Selfridge Air National Guard Base in Michigan.
Seen by some as a sign of confidence in its future. And announcements of billions for defense and border programs.
So really a very active administration across a huge range of areas.
No question about it. Okay, finally, let's touch on the reactions. Public, political.
Right. How has all this landed? It seems Americans are offering pretty mixed grades on these first 100 days.
Yeah, reports show grades ranging from like D all the way up to B, so a wide spectrum.
And Democratic governors have been pretty vocal critics.
Especially about tariffs and cuts to federal services, yeah.
Looking at the overall approval ratings, though, at this 100-day mark, President Trump's numbers seem historically lower compared to many past presidents starting out.
That's what the data suggests. And polls show net negative approval on most specific issues surveyed.
Concerns about the economy, rising prices, that seems to be a big factor in public sentiment.
It does. But it's crucial to remember, President Trump still has a very strong base of support. And many of his supporters praise these actions, particularly on immigration and the economy. They see him as tackling the issues he promised to address.
And there's also maybe a segment, even folks who didn't vote for him, hoping he might adopt a more measured style as the term goes on.
That sentiment exists too, yeah. A sort of wait-and-see approach from some.
So to kind of wrap it all up, these first 100 days of President Trump's second term, characterized by rapid policy changes, definitely.
A very assertive use of executive power.
Yeah, and a clear focus on key priorities like immigration and trade.
And these actions have, as you'd expect, generated significant reactions, both positive and negative, across the public and the political spectrum.
And as we've tried to do in this deep dive, we've aimed to just lay out the facts as reported by a wide range of sources.
Giving you the information, hopefully, to draw your own conclusions about this initial, very busy period.
So maybe the final thought to leave you with, considering just the sheer pace and scope of these first 100 days, what do you think the long-term implications might be for how the U.S. government works, for international relations, even for our daily lives? What stood out most to you from this overview? Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
And that's your 15 minutes on the commute. Thanks for spending your morning with me. I know your time is valuable, and I hope today's episode helped you feel just a bit more informed, curious, or ready to start your day. If you liked what you heard, follow the show and share it with a friend who needs a smarter commute. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place, with a fresh 15 minutes to kickstart your morning.